What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day for Tesla, for SPY, for the QQQs, and the entire stock market, as we have the big FOMC meeting. We have Jerome Powell speaking tomorrow, so I'm going to give you guys all the details you need to know about the big meeting for tomorrow and how it may affect the markets going forward. But before I break anything down about all of this information, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 5 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends in just 10 days and has been extended once again. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So Tesla did something very similar to what I actually predicted. I told you guys that Tesla would likely see a small pop in the morning to retest about 163. We went up a little bit higher than that in the morning because of some news that came out involving Tesla raising some prices. But then after that, as the market began to sink, we saw Tesla sink with the market, getting dragged down as well and losing the strength it initially had. Then Tesla continued to drop, and it actually closed very close to what my target was, around the 160 area, if not a little bit lower. And that is where Tesla closed down 0.94%. But the real question is Tesla going to get a massive bounce? Are we about to rally going into tomorrow, or is Tesla going to continue to get rug pulled with the markets? And in order for us to understand the answer to this, we have to look at the context as to why the market dropped today and also what's happening tomorrow. To start us off, we had some very big concerns that came out for the market because many regional banks are continuing to fall. We're seeing more and more risks of more depositors just running away from the banks, which is leading to more withdrawals from the regional side. The banks are responsible for helping to inject more liquidity into the systems, and with the massive rate hikes playing a big role in this, we're seeing a big loss for the banks. The banks are losing lots and lots of their very, very important depositors. They're also at some risks of contagion, and many banks did end up getting sold to the bigger banks, right? We saw this happen to First Republic getting sold to the bigger counterparts. And the real question is this about to continue? Or are we about to see a very big credit crunch? In my opinion, it's very likely something like that could happen given how aggressive the Fed was for the past year, but there aren't true signs of exactly what is going to break first, and that's what we're actually waiting for. Now, I also want to add that the news was talking a lot about the debt ceiling crisis. This is once again very, very important. However, Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell in the past few months have talked about how this is not that huge of an issue for them. They believe that we're going to quickly just raise the debt ceiling, and basically Congress has to do that during a time like this. The question is, what will be the strings attached to that decision? What will, one of the parts of the House end up, you know, fighting for? Do they want us to start paying off more debt quickly? Do they want to limit government spending? We'll have to wait and see first. But the bottom line is, this is leading to more volatility in the stock market. This has led to a big pullback in the past, and this is part of why the market's dropping too. Finally, we also have the FOMC meeting tomorrow that's contributing to why the market sold off, because we tend to see more selling, more profits being secured, and more delta hedging during times like this. Now, for earnings, we actually have AMD coming out in just a couple of minutes. But I also want to add that CVS and a couple of others will be reporting tomorrow. Nothing too significant. The biggest day is going to be Thursday, where we have Apple, Shopify, Coinbase, and many others like that. Apple is going to be huge. But before Apple's earnings comes out, we have the biggest event for tomorrow, and that's going to be the FOMC meeting and also the rate hike decision. Before it happens, we have some PMI data coming out, which could lead to some volatility in the markets, but I do believe the market's just going to remain very choppy tomorrow, not make a crazy move in either direction to open this up, unless we have more negative news involving the banks. But what I do believe is going to happen is at about 2 o'clock p.m., the interest rate hike decision is going to come, and the odds do favor the market actually trying to pump either right before or even during the time that the rate hike decision comes out. So 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time is when it's coming out. And in order for the market to crash, we'd have to get a 50 basis point rate hike. If the Fed announces a pause, initially the market will likely have a more positive reaction, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that a good thing. And here's why. So if the Fed pauses, right, this would be technically earlier than expected. And that's bad news because the Fed is starting to capitulate. The Fed is starting to, stop the rate hikes because things are starting to break in the economy. Banks are starting to struggle, which is hinting at a more severe recession than what the market was expecting. So yes, if the Fed pauses, the market might actually initially pump, but then later on, the market could still get a very, very big pullback later on. However, the most likely possibility would be a 25 basis point rate hike with a 85% probability. If the Fed gives us that, the market could also pump off of that because the market is expecting it, and this is not going to be anything new. Now, either way, the odds do favor that around 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, the market will try to pump a bit. The market's going to have a very positive reaction. Do not become too complacent and comfortable when seeing that, because at 2:30 p.m., right, 30 minutes after the rate hike decision comes, we have the Fed press conference, and that's where things get serious. Jerome Powell is going to be speaking, and what he says is going to either cause the market to pump and rally, or he could rug pull the entire stock market. From a technical standpoint, SPY is not looking very good, so it is very possible for us to get rug pulled, but I'm always open to anything, and I truly cannot predict what he's going to say. I can't speculate about what he may say. And that is, if he is asked about like the rate hike, the next rate hikes for the future. If Powell says the Fed may pause during the next meeting or very, very soon, the market may get a very positive reaction to this initially. And if Powell talks about the debt ceiling, in my opinion, he's likely going to keep the same stance as before, where he said we're most likely going to see the debt ceiling get raised to help the economy survive, so the government has money essentially. Uh, that's most likely going to happen too if he is asked about it, and that's also going to be positive for the stock market. But if Jerome Powell comes and he ends up saying that things are starting to break, the inflation is still very high and we could see a recession. If he says anything like that, the market could get rug pulled and we could see more downside. If Powell also does not say anything about a pause and he just maintains his stance about inflation, right? I actually have a chart right here. I'm going to show you. Very recent data came out for March, and we saw core CPI get higher than CPI in itself. And what that tells us is the fact that CPI used to be heavily dictated by energy. Energy used to cause CPI to go up like crazy. Now it's no longer just energy. We're starting to see different sectors begin to increase. We also saw the manufacturing PMI report just a couple of days ago show us signs of inflation maybe hiking up a bit by the time we get to the summer. So Jerome Powell knows all this. If he says anything about high inflation again, that could be very negative. So I know I'm going all over the place. My point in saying all of this information about Powell is because he could really cause the market to rally or he could cause us to crash. It's got to be one of those two. The technicals are looking more bearish. But I'm always open to any possibility because unexpected things can happen when you least expect them. Looking at the Fed, they've been raising rates in a very aggressive manner. And every time the Fed has done this, or at least raised rates to a large extent, we have seen something break in the economy. And it's very likely that something will break eventually. We could see a credit crunch or something like that. But then again, we're just going to have to be very patient to see what specifically happens. And Jerome Powell could give us more information about this. He has been in the past saying that a recession is unlikely. Now he's actually shifting his focus, and we did see some Fed officials say a recession is most likely going to happen. So the Fed is switching around and kind of flip flopping. We'll see what Powell says. Be ready for some crazy volatility when he speaks. Now, as far as Tesla goes, Tesla actually pumped in the very beginning of the day. This was in part because of the news that came out that Tesla will be increasing the Model Y and 3 prices in the USA and China, but not by much overall. I mean, just the fact that Tesla is doing this is showing some confidence in their ability to sell these cars. We saw an increase of about $250 in the USA and about $289 in China. It is very minor, but it will actually help them as they get more and more sales. Why is Tesla doing this? Well, look at their inventory levels. I keep talking about this on the channel because it's so important for Tesla. When Tesla was way up here, right? This is when they actually started cutting prices. This is what caused inventory levels to drop as we saw more demand for Teslas in general. And then what happened was Tesla still saw demand decrease during, I would say, near the end of Q1 going into the month of April. But as of recent, Tesla announced their sixth price cut, which is right here, and we started to see demand come back. It's also because demand tends to increase during the summertime for cars, especially when lots of students like graduate and things like that. So that's also playing a bit of a role. And now for Tesla, we're seeing demand continuing to increase as their inventories are dropping again. So that's a very good sign for Tesla. This is increasing the odds of a strong report for Q2. Production is no problem, in my opinion. The bigger issue and the bigger question is going to be deliveries. So far, things are looking a lot better. And now that Tesla knows this, they know that there's lots of demand for their cars, sales are going up. Tesla is starting to increase their prices a little bit more. This could have also been a tactic by Tesla because in the beginning, when Tesla was cutting prices, this actually led to a big increase in demand. And now Tesla's doing these tiny little price increases, and many people are seeing this on the news. And now this could actually lead them to start. It's almost like people are FOMOing into stocks. They're just buying in like crazy. Well, it's similar with the Tesla. They're just starting to buy in because they know prices could start going up again. They want to snag these deals as soon as possible. And so far, it's working in Tesla's advantage, which is a good sign for their next earnings and also their next deliveries report. Volume is pretty average at 127 million, a little bit below average. And overall, short volume on Tesla is still very flat. It's not really doing too much. The price price ratio is pretty flat too. Tesla was not necessarily heavily underperforming or outperforming the markets. And a new analyst known as Piper Sandler is saying Tesla is going to outperform the markets. So that's a good piece of news that came out for May. Tesla tends to be green only about 48% of the times on Wednesdays. That doesn't really matter too much though, because once again, we have FOMC. And the short interest on Tesla has increased a little bit. We did see about 20.4 million Tesla shares shorted the last time this came out, a slight increase compared to before. Now, when it comes to the charts, there's not a whole lot to say. Really, what I think is going to happen to the market in the beginning is we're likely going to react to the news. If there are more bank collapses, then once again, we could see more bearish price action. But as of right now, I'm not seeing that. So I do anticipate lots of sideways action tomorrow. And then as we approach the rate hike decision around 2 o'clock p.m., I think the market might pump a little bit. We might see some pumping. And then once the decision comes out, the odds favor the market starting to pump even more. However, here's the thing if the market pumps approaching, or I'm sorry, right after the rate hike decision, then we're going to make an even bigger reaction to what Powell says during the conference. Typically, pumping before it is not the best of news, but I'm always open to anything. So I would anticipate us pumping a little bit during or right before the conference starts at 2:30 p.m. And then Powell is going to give his speech. If he's bullish, I mean, if he causes the market to, pump, regardless of what he says, the S&P 500 is going to start flying and get closer to that 4,200. SPY is going to get closer to about 416. If he rug pulls us, if he causes the market to crash, we're going to start coming down pretty hard and break the lows that we made today. By tomorrow, that should happen, and we're going to see a rug pull. It's got to be one of those two. I really don't know. I wish I knew, but it's all on Jerome Powell's hands. He's very, very unpredictable. He is an anomaly compared to other catalysts, and we will see how that affects the markets. For Tesla, for tomorrow, let's see what the news tells us in the morning, but I am anticipating it trying to rebound a little bit in the morning, get back to about 163, come back down, just trade sideways as the day goes on. Very boring, boring price action to start us off. Tesla might pump a little bit as we get closer to the rate hike decision. And then after that, we will react to what Jerome Powell says. If he causes the market to pump and rally, we could see Tesla continue to pump into the next couple of trading days, make its way all the way up to 166 and maybe even break that heavy resistance and make it to about 170 plus. We could see Tesla explode with the market if Powell pumps us. If he announces like the Fed's going to pause soon, the debt ceiling is, it's not that horrible of a situation. They're going to get through it, and he pumps the markets. But if Powell rug pulls the markets, then we might see Tesla also crash. Tesla could break below 160. If that happens, watch 158, then watch 155. very important support. If both of those fail, there's 152 and Tesla has to hold that. We have to hold the 152 area because if we fail to do so, it could crash all the way down to the 140s, right? There is a risk of that. I do think it's unlikely that it's going to crash that hard unless Jerome Powell says something the market does not like or there are like way more bank collapses. But like I said before, be prepared for anything by the end of the day. I don't know exactly how it's going to go. For Coinbase, if we're bullish, and when I say if we're bullish, you already know what I'm implying. If we're bullish by the end of the day, we could see Coinbase hit 54, then 56. If we're bearish, it could actually come well below 50. Don't forget, Coinbase has earnings in just a couple of days. So there is a good chance it won't crash too hard. But once again, if the market gets rug pulled, it could still break below 50 and retest 48. If the dollar ends up breaking out, based off the Fed's monetary policy changes, this could be bearish for the stock market. It did try to break out a little bit today, but overall it came right back down. Still trading kind of flat. It's still a little bit flat. It's not really getting the true breakout we want to see on this. If the breakout does end up getting triggered by Jerome Powell, then that's going to be bearish for the stock market. But if the dollar continues to chop around and Powell does not cause the breakout, the market has a chance of rebounding, or at least it's going to become more likely. For NEO, if we're bullish, it's going to make its way up to 7.8, if not $8. If we're bearish by the end of the day tomorrow, it's going to come and break to new lows below 7.33, getting closer to 7, if not 6.5. What do I think is more likely? I really don't know. I do think we're going to pump after the rate hike decision comes out, but I don't know what Powell is going to cause. That's why I'm always open minded to anything, and you should be too. Microsoft closed red as I predicted. If we're bullish, it's going to break above 309 and make its way up to about 315. If we're bearish, it's going to break down to 300. If that fails, there's 295, then 291. If, let's see, the QQQ ends up pumping, it's going to make its way all the way up to 324.5, if not 325. If we end up getting rug pulled by Powell, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to come all the way down to about 313, if not 309. So make sure you guys are ready for that, depending on what Powell does. Don't forget, it might pump after the rate hike decision, but don't be too complacent and comfortable seeing the market pumping. You have to be prepared for anything. The VIX was up over 10%, so the odds do favor the VIX coming down either on Wednesday or Thursday. So there's a high probability of the market getting a rebound on one of those days. But once again, this is just based off technicals alone. We cannot trade solely based off those. From a technical standpoint, there is a high chance of the market trying to bounce, but I just don't want to count on that or be too fixated on that. It really depends on what Powell says. Technicals are not always perfect. Unexpected pieces of news could come, but for now, the VIX has some strength. If the VIX keeps breaking out, right, if it remains bullish and it just keeps going, that's going to become not the best of signs for us because we are getting some signals of that possibly happening as we have a bullish divergence. And once again, the S&P 500 tanking could cause the VIX to break out as it's very undervalued. But if the VIX has more room to come down since it has a gap below, then the exact opposite could happen and the market could try to bounce instead, causing the VIX to come down. I really don't know. It depends on Powell. We'll just have to wait and see. For Amazon, this was a little bit better than I predicted. I predicted Amazon would come down to about 100 to 102, then try to just trade sideways from there. Instead, it made its way up to about 103, so it's slightly higher than expected. Uh, it really depends on what Powell and the meeting really causes. I just don't know. If it's bullish, it's going to make its way to about 105, then continue to break out to 109. If it's bearish, it's going to come down to 102, then 100 flat. For NVIDIA, if we're bullish, I mean, it did exactly what I predicted, getting very close to about 280. If we're bullish, it's going to bounce off this level and make its way back up to 290 by the time we close tomorrow, if not going into Thursday, or I'm sorry, Wednesday/Thursday. And then if we're bearish, it's going to crash down to 275 and then maybe make its way back to the high 260s, depending on what Powell says. For Apple, if we're bullish, it's going to break above 270. Not 270, 170. Sorry about that. And if we're bearish, it's going to make its way down to 166. If that fails, there's 164 followed by 160 flat. AMD has earnings. It's down 3% so far. We'll see how this actually goes. I'm still waiting for the call, of course. If it's bullish, I mean, I don't think it's going to be as impacted by the meeting. We just have to wait for earnings. For Meta, if we're bearish, Meta's going to come all the way down to about 235. If that fails, then there's 230 flat. And then we have our next major support is 225. If we're bullish, however, if Powell causes the pump, this thing is going to make its way up to 245. It could even go higher. Finally, for Google, before I end the video, if Google is bullish, it's going to go up to 109. If it's bearish, it's going to make its way down to 100. And then the 10-year Treasury yield is just a little bit in the red. If this thing wants to turn bullish, if it comes up to fill this gap, that's going to become bearish for the stock market. If it ends up tanking because of what's happening with the banks, this could actually help the markets a little bit. If it tanks down to about 33.75, this could theoretically help the markets, but we'll just wait and see how it goes. All right, guys. So for Tesla, one last time, if Powell, in the beginning, expect lots of shop for Tesla, just sideways price action. I think Tesla might pump either during or approaching the rate hike decision. And then during the FOMC press conference, we're going to react to what Powell says. If Powell pumps the markets, Tesla could go all the way up to 166. If it breaks that, 170 plus becomes possible. But if Powell rug pulls us, Tesla's going to make its way down below 160. And it really depends on the extent of the rug pull. If it's really bad, Tesla could end up crashing pretty hard. If it's not too bad, we could see Tesla try to hover in the 155 to 158 area for some time before making a bigger move depending on Apple's earnings. All right, but until then, thank you all so much for listening. Get ready for tomorrow. It's going to be massive. I also have some merch for you guys if you're interested in buying anything. You should be able to see it very close to the comment section. And I thank you all so much. I appreciate every single one of you. Tesla to the moon, the market to the moon, as the long term is still very bright despite the volatility and downside we're seeing. And peace out.